Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the Phil Spector murder case? In 2009, Phil Spector was convicted of the 2003 murder of Lana Clarkson. Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. So first I'll go through the background of Phil Spector, I'll move to the timeline of the crime, and then I'll offer my analysis. Phil Spector was born in the Bronx, New York, on December 26, 1939. In 1949, Spector's father brought an end to his own life, and his mother moved the family to Los Angeles. In 1958, Spector formed a band called the Teddy Bears and worked on various musical projects. He started producing in 1960. He retired in 1966, so I guess that was at around age 27. And a few years later, he returned to work and produced a Beatles album as well as many other projects. As time went on, Spector, who was already known for being a bit reclusive, became more detached from society. In 1974, he was in a motor vehicle accident where he was thrown through the windshield of his car. He sustained severe injuries to his head. Spector returned to work after a long recovery. He was married 3 times and had several children. His last marriage ended in April of 2016. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. The events related to the crime took place in 2003 in the vicinity of Los Angeles. Phil Spector was 69 years old at this time. A man named Adriano D'Souza drove occasionally for Phil Spector. On February 2, 2003, Spector was going to meet an old high school friend at a restaurant. D'Souza arrived at Spector's house to drive him. Dinner was finished between 9:30 and 10 p.m. Spector was a little drunk at this point. He then went to a bar with a woman named Kathy Sullivan. After that, they went to another bar, then to a club. Spector tried to get into the VIP room, but a 40-year-old woman named Lana Clarkson, who was training to be a hostess and a security officer, stopped Spector. He said, "Don't you know who I am?" a common phrase many celebrities use as a likability suppressant. Spector was allowed to enter when a waitress recognized him. He continued drinking. Sullivan wasn't drinking alcohol. Spector became upset with her, and he had D'Souza drive her home. Spector started hitting on his waitress and Clarkson. Clarkson started making small talk with Spector. Her behavior was out of the ordinary. Perhaps she was a little starstruck. Spector was cut off from alcohol by the club and left at around 2:20 a.m. D'Souza drove Spector and Clarkson to Spector's house. After dropping them off at the front door, D'Souza drove the Mercedes around the back of the house and waited to take Clarkson home. I guess he was just waiting for the pair to do whatever they were going to do. At about 5 a.m., a noise that sounded like a bang startled D'Souza. Moments later, Spector opened the back door of the house. D'Souza exited the car thinking it was time to drive Clarkson to her residence. Spector stepped out onto the porch. He was holding a .38 caliber revolver in his right hand. Spector said to D'Souza, "I think I killed somebody." D'Souza could see a woman's legs through the back door, which was open. He stepped to the side a little bit and could see her entire body. She was slumped in the chair, positioned half in the chair and half on the floor. Blood was on her face, and her legs were extended in front of her body. D'Souza also believed he saw a small amount of blood on Spector's finger. D'Souza inquired as to what happened. Spector shrugged his shoulders and stood there with a blank stare on his face. At this point, D'Souza fled. I wonder why he didn't flee in the first place. He tried to operate his cell phone, but he could not do so due to the stress. He returned to the Mercedes and drove it to the gate. After a few moments, when he was able to calm down, he called Phil Spector's secretary. D'Souza said he did this because he didn't know the address of Spector's home, and he suspected the police may want to know that information given the circumstances. She did not answer. D'Souza left her a message. He said he thought Spector killed some lady. At 5:02 a.m., D'Souza called the police after finding the address on a sign outside the front gate. He told the dispatcher that he thought his boss killed somebody. When the police arrived, D'Souza told them the same thing. More officers arrived and they cautiously approached the house. They saw Spector moving around the second floor. Spector then came down to the first floor and walked out of the back door. He stood there simply looking at the officers. They told him to put his hands in the air. Spector turned around and started walking back in the house saying, "Hey guys, you got to come see this." The officers arrested him and found Clarkson's body positioned just like D'Souza had described. They found a Colt Cobra .38 caliber 6-shot revolver under Clarkson's leg. The weapon was loaded with 6 cartridges and had a spent round under the hammer. There was a side table not far from Clarkson. One of its drawers was open. A leather holster was in that drawer. The weapon appeared to fit that holster. In a nearby bathroom, the police found a cotton diaper that had been soaked in water and was covered with blood. Later testing indicated there was no gunshot residue on Spector's hands, and there was gunshot residue on Clarkson's hands. In the master bedroom closet on the second floor, they found a white jacket crumpled on the floor. It was stained with Clarkson's blood. Her blood was also on the back of her own wrists. An examination of the crime scene determined that the revolver was in Clarkson's mouth when it was fired, and this discharge was the cause of her death. Spector was tried for murder. I'll start by looking at the prosecution's case, and then I'll move to the defense. Prosecution experts concluded that the evidence was consistent with Spector wearing that white jacket and shooting Clarkson. They said that her blood could not have been on the back of her wrists in a mist-like pattern if she had been holding the gun. In looking at Clarkson's state of mind, the prosecution said that she had no mental health treatment history and never attempted or threatened to bring an end to her own life. In addition to working as a waitress, she worked as an actress and a model. She was future-oriented. For example, tax preparation documents were found in her apartment. Several women testified about Spector's prior behavior, more or less establishing a pattern over about a 20-year time period. Phil Spector would become hostile and threatening when women tried to leave his company, especially if they were trying to leave his home at night. He frequently locked doors to prevent them from leaving and threatened several of them with firearms, including a revolver and a 12-gauge shotgun. In a few of these instances, the women reported that when Spector was threatening and violent, sometimes he would just switch to being normal and polite in an instant, almost like he snapped out of it. Now moving to the defense, there was a good deal of expert testimony from the defense. Here are a few key items. The blood spatter on the white jacket indicated that Spector was close to Clarkson when the revolver discharged, but they said that the stain on the left cuff was not impact spatter. The blood on the grips of the firearm was inconsistent with a normal firing position, so inconsistent with Spector firing the gun. 99% of intraoral gunshot deaths are suicide. No evidence suggested that the gun was forced in Clarkson's mouth or that there had been any other type of struggle. The bruises on her wrists were caused post-mortem. Clarkson was physically stronger and healthier than Spector. She could have easily overpowered him. The defense also had a different theory about Clarkson's state of mind, saying that she had a brief period of depression after falling and breaking her wrists. She also had chronic migraines, financial problems, struggles with substance use, and she was impulsive. In 2007, a mistrial was declared because of a hung jury. Spector was tried again in 2008 and convicted in 2009 of second-degree murder and using a firearm in the commission of a crime. He was sentenced to 19 years to life in prison, eligible for parole in 2024. It's been reported that because Spector never earned a high school diploma, he was forced to take GED classes in prison. And I imagine the state paid for that, so that was a plus for Spector. It's also been reported that Spector spends most of his time in his cell. Now moving to the analysis. Spector has been described by various people who knew him as having pathological jealousy, being insecure, and having mood swings. His children described him as a monstrous father. Spector once said that he had been diagnosed and treated for bipolar disorder. It's also been theorized that perhaps he had some type of substance use disorder. Alcohol seemed to be a key part of his life. He sustained a traumatic brain injury in 1974. He was already demonstrating unusual and aggressive behavior prior to this. A TBI can make those characteristics much worse. Spector had a history of brandishing weapons, pointing them at women, and threatening to shoot them. I find it interesting that he was described as snapping back to normal after a violent mood. This is something I've seen several times in my clinical experience relating to situations involving TBI and substance use. In terms of Spector's guilt, the statement that he made to his driver doesn't prove that Spector was guilty. Spector was intoxicated. He could have said anything. However, it would have looked better for him if he said nothing and if he was not holding the gun. Spector gave an interview after his arrest where he said that Clarkson was trying to kiss the gun and that the shooting was an accident. I think this actually hurt him. It made it seem like her behavior was not intentional. Proving that she intentionally pulled the trigger would have been exculpatory for Spector. He should not have given that interview, and if he did give the interview, he should not have said it was an accident. The physical evidence is difficult to interpret. The experts came up with opposite conclusions. Spector did have some time to clean up. I think his efforts may have caused additional confusion. I think it's reasonable to believe that either Spector killed Clarkson or she brought an end to her own life. No one else was involved in the shooting. Neither person had a motive to cause Clarkson's death. I find it difficult to believe that Clarkson would commit suicide in somebody else's home using the other person's gun only 2 hours after meeting them. Evidence indicates that she was trying to make a good impression. This is definitely not consistent with a good impression. It makes sense to me that Spector was the one who introduced the firearm into the situation. I don't think Clarkson was rifling through drawers and happened to find the gun. Spector was initially handling the gun, and there is nothing in his history to suggest he would have given it to Clarkson. He introduced it, and he pulled the trigger. Clarkson did not resist because she was also intoxicated or because she was taken by surprise. One popular theory about this case is that Spector didn't mean to pull the trigger. He was doing what he often did, threatening a woman with a gun, and the gun magically went off. The Colt Cobra has an 8-pound trigger pull when it's being operated as double action. It's possible that Spector pulled the hammer back and fired the gun in single action. The trigger pull would still be about 3.5 pounds in that situation. Here's how I view this. Accidental trigger pulls often occur when a person leaves their finger inside the trigger guard and they try to maneuver the weapon, like elevating it. In this case, Spector was pointing the gun at her head. An accidental trigger pull is not likely in that scenario. Even if this somehow was accidental, Spector was extremely reckless and committed a felony by pointing the weapon in the first place. I think that Spector did commit murder, but I don't think the evidence supported a second-degree murder conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. I think manslaughter would have made more sense in this case. Phil Spector was a person who was accustomed to getting his way. He was wealthy and famous at a young age and had more money than common sense. It appears as though he had a sense of entitlement. He was arrogant, demanding, sensation-seeking, assertive, and grandiose. When combining those traits with a traumatic brain injury and an extreme level of alcohol consumption, this is a recipe for disaster. His celebrity and fortune shielded him from any meaningful consequences, even though many of the women who testified did call the police right after Spector's threatening behavior. Even still, a few women gave him a second chance. I think it's reasonable to believe that many people in Spector's life put up with his bad behavior because he was famous. What lessons can we learn from this case? I have 3 here. Alcohol and firearms are a deadly combination. We've seen this many times across many cases. Number 2, even though people can change, it's dangerous to give them a second chance without evidence that a change actually occurred. And it's even more dangerous when the evidence actually supports their behavior has worsened. Number 3, some people are tempted to rely on a behavioral pattern where someone who is intoxicated and armed is threatening them, but all of a sudden, that person's nice. It makes them feel a little safer, like the true person is a nice person and the violence just snuck out. But that is not a safe way of thinking. As easily as the person could go from being aggressive to polite, their aggression could worsen. The tendency to have mood swings doesn't make being intoxicated and armed any safer. It's like choosing between an armed, drunk sheep in a tiger suit or a tiger in a sheep suit under the same circumstances. Neither one inspires comfort, for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that both a sheep suit and a tiger suit would be pretty warm and somewhat itchy. Those are my thoughts on the Phil Spector case. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis on this topic to be interesting. Thanks for watching.